Notice there are 4 people on stage and not the 2 that are listed. So we have Lee Moyer, Tom Chalky, Celestia Ward, and Andrew Taylor. They're going to be covering very, very important and interesting topics for you as deals with comics and skepticism. Okay, very quickly, Lee Moyer's 4 answers to the questions. The skill he'd love to have is tact. It was very good. The thing he would save out of a fire in his house is his friend's painting. He said, pirates versus ninjas, no hesitation, pirates. Cake or pie, no hesitation, pie. Tom Chalky said the skill he would like to have would be perfect 24-hour recall, to remember what happened yesterday perfectly. That's what he would like to have. He would save out of a fire in his house an engraving, a James Gilray engraving from 1814. It's a political cartoon, a very early political cartoon. Sounds really cool. Also, no hesitation, pirates, no hesitation whatsoever. And apparently his wife makes incredible pies, so his wife's apple pie beats cake every time. Celestia, and he would say from the fire as well. Excellent. Celestia Ward, she wishes she could draw hands. That would be her skill, her talent. She would save her T-shirt collection, which I'm assuming would be in a big bundle, I guess. Pirates versus ninjas, pirates again. And cake versus pie, cake, preferably dulce de leche cake, which sounds, yeah, I know, exactly. Finally, Andrew Taylor wishes he had the talent and skill of organization. He said that he would save nothing out of his house because they're just objects, which I thought was bullshit, and he chose pirates without hesitation, and finally, cake or pie? Pie, pecan preferably. So, Lee, Tom, Andrew, and Celestia, here they are.
Hi, everybody.
Talk in the mic.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Is it working? Okay. My name is Celestia Ward, and I'm here to introduce my 4 panelists. We bring you cartoonists. I don't know if you guys saw the intro out there, but it says Skeptics in Comics. We are not stand-up comics. Trust me, you'll find that out. We are the type that draw and communicate through graphics and word panels and very subversive ways to get people to understand ideas, which is something I think the skeptic community could really benefit from, and something we who consider ourselves skeptic cartoonists utilize all the time. So let me get to, this is just a quick quote here from a book I'm currently reading, The Madhouse Effect by Michael E. Mann, the climatologist, and Tom Towles, the editorial cartoonist. A scientist tries to understand the way the world works. An editorial cartoonist tries to show the ways it doesn't. My background real quick here, I was, do a quick intro for everybody. This is not my computer.
Hell is other people's computers.
Yes. This is me. I'm a freelance everything. I've been doing cartoons for the past 25 years. Prior to that, I was an editor at the Johns Hopkins University Press. When you do editing, you are looking for stuff that doesn't make sense, so you can remove it or have it make sense. When you do cartooning, you're looking for stuff that doesn't make sense, so you can use it and make fun of it. So moving to my right here, we have Lee Moyer. He has been 35 years, he's been doing freelancing. He is specializing in branding, and he has worked as an art director at Electronic Arts, and his specialty there has been the focus on user experience, which is another thing the skeptic community could benefit from, the user experience. A lot of people don't like the user experience of skepticism. It just feels like they're just telling me I'm wrong. 10 years as a docent at the Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian, which is a very interesting background for an arts person and a cartoonist. And there's his information. He's got some very awesome stuff, the little small gods. I love your small gods, Lee.
There will be some small gods in the hall, hopefully later on.
Yes. And then we have F. Andrew Taylor. I like saying that, F. Andrew Taylor. Can you add like Ulysses as like your second first name?
I can see about it. I can jump into that.
So I could just say this is F.U. Andy Taylor.
Right.
He is a longtime reporter and cartoonist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. He is also one of the podcast co-hosts of Geek Shock. He is known as Fact Check Andy, which, perfect for a Skepticon. Fact Check Andy.
I was dubbed that ironically at first, but no.
Yeah.
Now I've accepted it.
And his comics include Christmas Puss and Murder Can Be Fun, and he has also taught cartooning. And down the row here, keep remembering, okay, Tom Chalkley, longtime friend of mine. Tom Chalkley was my first cartooning professor 25 years ago at Johns Hopkins University. And he is still doing it. He is still teaching cartooning to science-minded undergraduates, slowly, painfully, one at a time. He is at the Johns Hopkins Center for Visual Arts. He has 35 years of being a contributing writer at the City Paper in Baltimore. He is a grassroots organizer and a professional activist. And he's been, in publications like The New Yorker and stuff like that. You've probably heard of that. And all of these folks love talking. So my job is going to be to wrangle them and make sure they're not talking for too long here. We're going to talk about comics journalism, which is a fairly recent thing that's developed, teaching people stuff through pictures. Actually, it goes back just a few millennia here. Sorry, I thought we'd have a table. And one of the things I think comics and communicating through cartoons can bring is it takes information vegetables and it makes it look like information dessert. And we need that. They say that the attention span is getting shorter and shorter, and I think we really need to fall back on some cartoons and also spring forward with some cartoons. And I'm just going to show you a couple of my favorites from the New Yorker here. Recent ones here. I don't know if you guys have seen. I don't know how to get rid of that. There we go. Tag. You have measles. And Angie could have used this in your last talk there about all the pressure points and what they deal with. Yeah, exactly. Yes, this has been updated. And then the Flat Earth Society. You know Charlie Hankin drew this. Flat Earth Society. It takes some people a little moment, but you'll see what's wrong with the picture there. Alrighty, and now to topics. All right, the first thing I want you guys to think about is how has the reach of comics changed? We don't have the funny papers anymore. Has anybody here read the funny papers in the past week? You actually, the hard copy. Congratulations, you guys are anachronistic. Nobody really reads the funny papers at home anymore, but we have the interwebs, and as Wally Wood once said of the Nancy comics, they're so simple and so straightforward that once you have decided not to read them, you already have. And everybody here has got a Facebook feed, I'm assuming, social media. It's the way that people communicate. And when you scroll past your Facebook feed, you're like, article, maybe I'll read that later, article, comic, and you've read it before you have decided not to read it. So, it's a way to reach into other camps that, that normally would not take the time to read even a one-page article by a scientist ever. Let me see here. Daryl Holiday, who is a crime writer, he had another great quote about reach here. Where did that go?
Talk amongst yourselves.
I'll tell you a little historical story while she's got it.
I've written a whole lot of crime stories. People would usually give it like 20 seconds, but package it up with a comic, and it's like you've never heard it before. The same people will read the story all the way to the end. It can become that bridge.
Do you guys know who Winsor McCay was? Winsor McCay made a comic strip called Little Nemo in Slumberland. He also sort of invented animation and stuff. He was a genius. He was one of the most talented people who has ever worked in our form. He was so talented, and he was flattered when that nice Mr. William Randolph Hearst wanted him to come to Hearst Papers. Wow, he would have a big reach. It'd be great. He'd work for Hearst. He went to work for Hearst. Guess what happened? Hearst said, "Oh, Little Nemo in Slumberland, you're not going to do that anymore. I own you. What you're going to do is you are going to make me political cartoons that are going to start any war I want started, and you are my propaganda machine." And when he finally left Hearst Papers, could he go back to Little Nemo in Slumberland? Of course not, because Hearst owned it. So he made a thing called In the Land of Wonderful Dreams, and it was as close as he could get. That is how powerful cartoons are.
Well, you bring up a really good point there, Lee, and that's one of the things I wanted you guys to talk about for this first topic is we don't have the funny papers anymore, but we have the reach of the internet and the freedom of the internet to do what we want and to get the messages out that we want.
Well, skip the internet for a second, though, because I also think people should be aware that the fastest growing field of print books is graphic novels. Okay, you've heard this term graphic novel, and it's a misnomer because a lot of the very best and most famous graphic novels are non-fictional. They are novelizations of history, such as Mouse by Art Spiegelman. A lot of great memoir comics. I don't know if any of you have read or seen the Broadway show of Fun Home by Alison Bechdel.
Also, the Bechdel test came from her. Does anybody know where the Bechdel test came from?
Yeah, cartoonists have all this influence on our lives.
But it's subversive. You don't know about it.
Security blanket. That's a term that came out of the comics. Anyway, but seriously, graphic novels are the fastest growing area. So-called graphic novels are the fastest growing area of book publishing. So the internet is indeed powerful, but those books are still jumping off the shelves. And, everything we've ever said about print books, we can say about the graphic novels. I would just, because I don't want to step on these guys' toes, I'm afraid I'm going to give Celestia another opening to say things I want to say today. But I love her, and she's great, and she probably would say it better. But, you guys go ahead. I'll come back.
Well, I mean, the case of Dr. Andrew Wakefield, Daryl Cunningham. If anybody else has his graphic novels out there, go find them. He's got several collections of famous hoaxes, bad science, homeopathy, and they're wonderful to just link to. They're not just available in graphic novel form. You can go on his blog and grab this at any point. If you have somebody on Facebook who's like, well, I don't know what the deal is with Dr. Wakefield. I mean, wasn't he railroaded? No, you can pull this up, and he goes through all the information, and it's in comic form. And unlike the typical science article where it'll just be a headline, and you can completely misinterpret what it's about from the headline, because the headline was written by a bad science editor who shouldn't have that job. You have it in graphic form. It's simple. And it's very difficult to boil things down to a simple idea. But it's very powerful.
Can I mention Jack Chick before you do, or are we not on that subject yet?
I've got Jack Chick in here. We're going to get to Jack Chick.
Can I interrupt with the internet again briefly? So what is a comic? A comic is usually a picture with a few brief words. Oh, we call that a meme today. Yeah. So our panel right here is really how we're trying to say we still are relevant. Because the truth is everyone in the world can now go to a meme maker, editor, and make whatever utter nonsense they want and ensure that people read it, because by the time they've decided they don't want to read it, they read it.
Well, yes and no. I would argue that the meme, oddly enough, I'm going to use a meme to explain this.
Ooh, meta.
I didn't pull it up, but there's a meme where somebody is explaining, a meme is basically a cartoon made by sad people that can't draw.
As opposed to the sad people who can draw.
And I think by default, a cartoon, a well-drawn, a well-executed, a well-designed cartoon, subliminally or overtly tells the person this information has authority way more than a meme ever can.
Let's hope so.
Yes.
Let's work to that, okay?
But yeah, so the reach of cartoons, do you guys feel like it is expanding, it is contracting, it is just turning into a hydra with 18 different heads?
I think cartoons that actually say something are expanding. I think, we don't have Blondie is dying, High and Lois is dying, but...
Hagar has a bad marriage.
Yes, he does. Not as bad as any Caps, though. But XKCD is giving people science facts on a daily basis.
XKCD, yeah.
Here's a phenomenon I've noticed from my class. Certain whole genres of cartooning are either moribund, like the newspaper comic strip has been shrinking since the 50s and is about to get down to where it's postage stamp size, and the content the data, if you will, that can be fit into those things is shrinking accordingly. The other thing that I think is very sad is I find that it seems to me that the single panel editorial cartoon is also dying quickly. And single panel editorial cartoon, how many of you grew up reading those? There's a real age differential. How many of you don't know what the hell I'm talking about when I say a single panel editorial cartoon? This young lady was when you opened one of these old newspapers, and on the page, along with the editorials, would be a cartoon. And it would usually, in the olden times, be a single panel cartoon, which was quite often a fairly elaborately constructed a metaphor or an allegory in which pictures, Uncle Sam represents the United States, so lion represents, all those cliche symbols. But if you grew up with them, you learned how to interpret them and take them apart. And they really required you to have a certain amount of cultural literacy. Well, cultural literacy nowadays seems to be renewed on a five-year basis. The things I know my children not only don't know, they don't care about. But I finally had a student who came up to me, and she's a jock. She was a lacrosse player or something like that. And she says, it's not that she didn't get a particular cartoon. She just didn't know how to read any kind of single-panel cartoon. She was not stupid. She just didn't have the tools even to understand New Yorker cartoons. Well, a lot of people don't understand New Yorker cartoons. You should move to New York. Okay, what's your problem?
Well, if you look on Reddit, there's a whole it's like a branching tree of things that mean different things. People putting together their own comics, usually using paste and clip little sprites. And yeah, it can get very meta there. The language just expands and expands and expands. You're like, oh, it's troll face. Oh, it's David Silverman going, with a goatee. It's Neil deGrasse Tyson. People are using the methods, but it's just getting a little bit more chaotic. It's no longer the very simple one-panel editorial cartoon.
But what I would say, though, is that the graphic novels and online strips, any kind of the strip form, the extended narrative comic, is in a growth phase. The problem is, and I'm going to venture an opinion here, the problem is that like all art forms, somebody once confronted Theodore Sturgeon, the great science fiction writer, who says, why do you write science fiction? It's junk. He said 95% of all art forms is junk.
I think the word he used was crap.
Crap. That was the scientific term.
True
crap.
Story.
Fact check Andy, everybody.
It is true, and there's an awful lot of crap, especially in the world of comics. So don't dismiss the world of comics, mostly because it is so largely about superheroes. Superheroes are unfortunately an artifact of history, and they got stuck in our brain, and it is one of the big, here's my opinion, they suck. And superheroes is bullshit.
I don't know, Tom, the last...
They're okay for metaphorical purposes.
They're good for,
in and of themselves, they're just a money-making machine for down here in L.A. Okay.
I'm going to interject and get back to your notion that it's this multi-headed hydra. Yeah. I was at a Halloween party this year, and I was the mascot from F Society. Does anyone in this room know what that means? Okay, there's a show called Mr. Robot, whose actual subtitle a year ago was "Our Democracy Has Been Hacked." It's called Mr. Robot. A few of you in this room know what it is. Everyone in this room should know what it is. It's absolutely, completely relevant to everything we're talking about. And you guys don't know what it is, and that's because information has indeed become this multi-headed hydra. And the fact is, we don't know where all the heads are. We don't know what's going on. There used to be, for good or ill, Mr. Hearst ran this giant syndicate, which is a word we also use for crime. And for good or ill, you knew where to look. Oh, maybe it was a big hydra head that was going to swallow you whole, but you knew where it was. Right now, we don't know where anything is. This mention of symbolism in comic strips, very apt, very proper. There was an entire movement of painters called the symbolists. And if you have a handy key for what flower means what virtue or vice, you can look through their paintings and they're a delight. But without that key, we look at the painting state and we're like, that is quaint and confusing. And that's where we are. We are losing, we have lost that common language, even if that common language came from, say, print fascists like Hearst. And now what do we have to replace it? So what we have, I feel, is a huge responsibility to forge that. And to me, one of the places that we can go is the internet, because irony is real. And I've befriended all of my favorite editorial cartoonists.
You can do that. Yeah.
Steve Brodner, unbelievable. P.S. Mueller, unbelievable. These guys are delighted to share the cartoons that don't get printed with you.
To rein it back in from the quaint.
Say, aren't you glad to prepare all these notes, so we're not going to let you get to?
Well, I want to rein it back in a little bit instead of talking about our favorite artistic veins. Let's talk about cartoons that are relevant to skeptics and methods of transferring information to people via cartoons. Cartoons have been compared to propaganda. They've been used as propaganda, and in a lot of ways, they use sort of the tools of the enemy against the enemy, if you harness the power of what we're talking about. Anecdotes, emotional manipulation through the narrative, use of fantasy and mythology, use of emotion. These are all things that skeptics and science-minded people kind of want to stay away from because we want just the data and the facts. But as Edward Tufte once said, who's a brilliant infographic designer, good design brings absolute attention to data. And so by putting it all together in a good cartoon, you can present very complicated ideas. Now, as far as humorous cartoons, this is Matthew Inman of The Oatmeal. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his style. Does anybody not know what The Oatmeal is? Or all of you know what The Oatmeal is. He told me once that although cartoons can change the world and you can get some really powerful statements through them and really educational statements, you have to sandwich these important ideas in between obese cats and barfing babies. Otherwise, you lose people. Otherwise, you lose your audience. Dan, the science enthusiast, who's one of the science aggregators who puts stuff out on Facebook all the time, he coined this term called reverse wolfing.
So in your analogy, the barfing baby is a dessert?
Oh, yes. Yeah, barfing babies are informational dessert.
Gotcha.
And this term called reverse wolfing, you guys know who David Avocado Wolf is? Yeah, that's a quick one I did of him. His method of getting pseudoscience and crap out there is he sandwiches it in every 5 or 10 pictures of a sunset with a really inspirational quote. Oh, and then the next one will tell you how, chemtrails are killing you, or medicine is bad because it's Western, or chocolate is magic because it raises things an octave of light, or something like that.
I understood the first part of the chocolate. I'm in the second part.
Yeah. So when David Avocado Wolf does it, he's putting these tinctures of bullshit out there along with his happy stuff. And when the Credible Hulk does it, he's putting out real information in between, funny pictures of cats with math memes. What sort of ways? Now, this is sneaky. Doing this is a sneaky way of feeding people information. What can you guys tell me about how cartoons are sneaky and how you maybe have used that yourself, how you've seen it used successfully or not?
I know I slipped. We had a new management take over the paper I was working at, and suddenly a lot of our articles became very clickbaity. And so in a cartoon, I slipped in the headline, something like 5 Thanksgiving meals you won't believe will change your life. And it was just there in the middle of it, and I'm sure 3 or 4 people got it and laughed at it, and maybe somebody saw it and thought about it, but yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm doing is I'm preparing a coloring book because I think it's important that this latest phase be jumped on properly, and
exploited.
And exploited. It's tentatively entitled "Great Moments in Religion."
Actually,
or a friend suggested "Religion's Greatest Hits," but that had a more violent sensibility.
And Lee's just reminded me that I jumped over a very important thing. Lee has brought a page, and we're going to have you guys try and think like cartoonists and summarize something in a very quick, boiled-down fashion. It is difficult to boil down an idea and keep it correct to one sentence. But
so I drew this.
And funny.
I've wanted to draw this cartoon for 20 years, and I keep telling this cartoon at parties, which isn't the same thing. So I drew it up, and I thought, I should do that New Yorker thing. They'll do a cartoon, and then they'll ask people for their captions, so let's have a caption contest. And Celeste has brought some prizes, and I've got some small gods, which I'll be showing in the hallway.
Now, if you don't want to participate, just pass the stack down. Pass it down. And anybody who wins... Now, if you come up with a good caption, turn it into Lee. Lee's not hard to find. He stands out in a crowd.
I'll be really easy to find.
And the winning caption is going to get a classic comic strips quiz deck and a set of creature cards.
And the small god of your choice from my table.
Okay.
And hopefully, we're going to have some very hard choices to make, and that's
Are we going to post these captions? Are you going to post the caption somewhere?
We'll figure that out.
Okay.
But by 5 o'clock tonight, let's make the deadline 5 o'clock tonight. So look at it over lunch, and you can figure out whether... Now, if I was your art director, I would have had that ship a little bit bigger, because there's like a little Christian ship floating.
Celeste worked as an editor for a long time.
But see, this is where you push back against your editor, and you say, yes, but the whole point of the cartoon, from my point of view, is that the thing that's coming is really tiny and unimportant.
Oh, you got to make them work for it, yeah. There you go. There are books on how cartoons work on the mind. Scott McCloud, Understanding Comics.
Yep.
Brilliant text on how people take in information differently when they're reading a comic or a cartoon. Stand-up comedians and magicians have talked about this and getting skeptical ideas across. The humor breaks down defenses. If you come at somebody, all of us were chit-chatting like right after that panel yesterday. Oh, battery's running low on the computer, somebody.
Uh-oh.
Does it have a cord? Yeah.
Mike?
Somebody pray for the computer.
Yes. So just like a stand-up comedian or a magician can break down people's defenses, cartoons absolutely can do that, and they can do that in a private way. They can do that, the person isn't being bombarded by a quote-unquote frontal assault in the middle of a discussion or a debate or a church or a stand-up club. They're in the comfort of their own home in their pajamas reading something on the internet, and they can sit there and think about a cartoon for a while, and it can work its magic.
Once you got them laughing, you got their attention.
Yes, once you have them laughing. And then they start thinking, well, why am I laughing? I'm laughing because that's funny. Why is that funny? Well, because it's kind of true. And it goes against everything I've been taught. Huh.
Are we still on sneaky?
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to go really quickly to, though, is to say that because we use the word comics is a misnomer, okay? They've never been all funny.
Yeah.
And yes, a laugh is one way to get people to see absurdity and contradiction. That's what all satire is about, right? You exaggerate something that's real and thereby point it up. Personally, I'm confessing to this room that I, as a cartoonist and as somebody who's drawn a lot of satirical and ridiculing type cartoons, I'm despairing of the virtue and value, not despairing, but my faith in ridicule and satire has been severely impaired by the events of the last year.
Yes.
You all laugh, so you know what I'm talking about.
We thought we were so powerful.
Can we, this proves how powerful cartoonists are and satirists that Donald Trump was elected. We've managed to alter reality so that we live in a satire now.
It's not worth it. It's not.
No, but in the realm of just this, but humor is a way to get under the door, over the transom. And this is the point Celeste made, and I was afraid she was going to bring up Jack Chick before I did.
Look, it's Jack Chick on the screen, everybody.
Couldn't get
Look at
Jack
that.
Chick up on the screen. Is that she alluded to this earlier. You don't need to be funny. You just need to have engaging, well-edited pictures, because what drags people in is the instantaneous visual effect.
Oh, Jack Chick was hilarious.
Now
We should probably see if people remember who Jack Chick is.
We still haven't got Jack Chick up on the screen.
We've got him on
we
the
do.
screen.
He's up on the
screen. Is he there?
It's his,
There's Jack.
Satan loves Halloween because it glamorizes the power of darkness, drawing little kids into his camp. And it's paying off. Witchcraft is exploding among teens today. The Lord hates Halloween and its evil origin. Satanic human sacrifices are a slap in God's face.
This is not intentional humor. Jack Chick was completely serious, and he was very successful, and he produced thousands and thousands
Millions
of little
and millions.
actual copies, but hundreds of titles of these little index-sized comic books, index card-sized comic books. How many of you have ever seen one of these on a bus?
Okay. Yeah.
Usually they're on buses.
You
and
can
bus
find them on your
stations,
favorite
et cetera.
urinals.
Yes, and there's a documentary called God's Cartoonist that's all about him. You should
Now, this is
see
a
that.
confession. It's kind of a confession I have to make. I'm a pretty well-established non-theist. My rational mind overrules my primitive superstitious mind, which is still there, but it overrules it. Jack Chick goes right to the primitive superstitious mind. The way he does it is by combining words which are accompanied by really compelling graphics. If somebody handed you a 6-page brochure, all type, talking to you about the book of Revelations and how it spells everything out for us in the future, how many of you would get past page 1? No. Like that.
They draw some pretty demons with it.
You draw demons. You draw people roasting in hell.
Make a pentagram.
You draw a very blank, every man or every woman kind of figure. And this is key. Every man, every woman are very important in cartoons. Because if you draw a blank, this is not a black guy, a white guy, it's just a guy. The more generic you can make it, the more the reader
Pareidolia.
identifies with it. Yeah. So you identify.
2 eyes in a line. Yep.
But you identify with it, and you're sucked in. Scott McCloud in Understanding Comics talks a lot about what he calls the masking effect. How instead of particularizing a character, you look at Tintin comics, and all the people in the comics have these blank mask-like faces. The real backgrounds and the boats and the airplanes are all highly realistic. It's a way of sucking you in. But the thing is that comics are a powerful informational tool by the virtue of the fact that they get in under the radar. If they can get in under the atheist's radar and make a little tiny part of my brain, that little primitive part of my brain says, oh no, what if it's all true and I'm going to roast in a lake of fire? That little voice pops up, especially if you grew up in a Catholic church or any myth-heavy environment like that. If it works for Jack Chick, it surely should work for rationalists. That we can distribute our own, well, I'm going to call him Jack Chalk, because my name's, just Tom Chalk Comics. Tom Chalk Publications. I want a funder. But really, we could do such a lot of good by explaining. This is where I was saying to somebody yesterday that the skeptics and atheist labels are unfortunately negative in context. You're skeptical of something. You're against God. What are we for? We're in favor of reason and science and facts. And I think comics can do and have done a great job with this stuff in the past, but it's always been kind of bad art, a lot of it.
There's a lot of bad art out there, yeah.
You ever read Classics Illustrated comic books? None of you? They actually did a pretty good job of laying out the classics. I feel like I actually read H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. No, I just read the comic book. But step for step, it was very faithful. But the art was kind of bad. Now, I'm not saying they need to be brilliant art, but they need to be readable art.
Now, I'm going to segue into one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, the psychological pull and the teaching without informing people that you're teaching. Because, I agree. Jack Chick, I disagree with everything that Jack Chick tracks talk about or teach. I disagree. I don't believe any of it. But if you handed me a Jack Chick tract right now, I would keep it and I would read it later.
Does anyone want a
would.
Jack?
Oh, he's got his own parodies of Jack Chicks right here.
So there's this famous story about the man who discovers the pot of gold and the leprechaun and tying the ribbon around the tree, and the poor bastard wakes up and there's a ribbon around every tree and he can't find his pot of gold. That's the strategy that I'm using as early and often as I can, because we live in a marketplace of ideas, and if you've got a lot of gods, say small gods to choose from, good on you. But years ago, someone thrust a bad trifold flyer into my hand and said, "You need this." And it didn't look like this. It was really ugly. It had no graphics at all. And I opened it up and it said, "In the beginning, there was Godzilla. So while these guys are doing their thing, I'm going to pass some of these out. Raise your hand if you want one.
Lee brought goodies for everybody.
Yeah. We get handouts.
Yes. Well, I want to tell you guys about a comic that I learned about called Bec de ses Amis. And it's a great analogy. I don't have any hard data on this. If there's any statisticians or psychologists out there who want to do a study on this, please do. But I heard Samantha Jacobite, who did her master's thesis on this comic. It was only published in the Louisiana area, and it was aimed at Cajuns. And I'm thinking of this as a great analogy comic because it was published bilingually. But see, the Cajun language, Cajuns in that region, that particular type of Cajuns that this was aimed at, they were illiterate, and they were more than illiterate, they were non-literate. They had no interest in learning how to read. It wasn't for them. They were kind of backwoodsy and proud of it, and they had no interest. And this comic started coming out, and it was published from the late 60s into the early 90s. It's called Bec de ses Amis, and all the word bubbles there are in Cajun French. And then it does have English translations there. And slowly, people who had no interest in reading began to pick up this comic. They'd see their kids reading it, because the kids who went to school and learned some Parisian French, how to read the words, and knew English, they'd read this as a family, and without meaning to, these Cajuns learned how to read. And that's kind of what I view as science education. You got these people, I don't need to learn about evolution. I don't need to learn this. I don't need to learn. Well, let's give them something interesting to look at that you can't get the jokes unless you understand the theory of evolution. You can't get the jokes unless you understand the premise of what a scientific theory is versus just the colloquial use of it. And that gave me hope when I heard her presentation, when I heard her speak about this, the transformative power that this had on what they called cultural literacy in the Cajun community. And it took them 30 years, but here's hoping. I wanted to talk to you guys about, it changed their mind. It changed their mind about how important reading was because they wanted to get the joke. Jokes are memorable. We like it. It helps us learn. Do you guys remember biology class, the Krebs cycle, that string of ATP and everything you had to memorize?
Some of us went to school a little before you did. That might not have been it.
ATP was when I decided that I was not going to be a scientist. It was when I looked at that, I said, no.
Is that Aliens versus Predators?
Yes. No, that's AVP.
I'm so confused.
The only way that I memorized that biological cycle of energy was to turn it into a cartoon. And I had the molecules punching the other molecules. And I had them stealing ions and electrons, and I gave them little faces, little everyman faces. And it was the only way I was able to memorize it. And I think if it worked for me, it can work for a lot of other people. But as gateway drugs, as something to pull people into something, can you guys speak to that point at all? We have like another 2 minutes on this topic, and then 5 minutes.
You haven't had a word in edge.
Oh, you guys have got it. I'll just spit in there when I've got them.
As a gateway drug.
Yeah, I mean, the one that came up earlier, I want to throw it in. Will Eisner was sort of the grandfather of modern comics. Got drafted. I think he got drafted. He anyways ended up in the service in World War II. And then for about 20 years, he did maintenance manuals and instruction manuals in comic book form, which is the only a lot of people learned how to put tanks back together or whatever.
That's important.
Yeah.
I want those guys knowing what to do.
Right, exactly.
Anyone who came here on a plane either read the cartoon or knows the cartoon really well. I sat in an exit row and I was fully prepared to do my duty.
That's true. The really important information out there, like, here's how to put your crib together without killing your baby.
And there's something
it's in comic form. It's
Actually,
just not,
in fact, I think the guide to safety on the airplane, I always have a slide of that in my first class because I say, is this comics? Because what I want people to see is that comics is, forget the word comic, picture stories. Just call them picture stories. But a comic doesn't have to be funny. A comic can be richly informative, or it could be an IKEA instruction.
That's exactly where I was going. What is wrong with those people?
They're ill picturate. Is their
Yeah, I mean,
they are.
the visual vocabulary is different for different countries. There are some things. I mean,
That is
you go to
true.
Japan, there's a whole iconography of where the teardrops or the liquids are flying out of their face. It means something to them that I don't know.
Plus, they read from right to left.
Right.
Well, the emanata is all different, but there's actually been some studies recently that where they've taken people from all different cultural backgrounds and different languages, and they've shown them some stories, and they've just had them pick, okay, what picture comes first, and what's second, what's third. The actual chronology of how the story goes, there is a universal understanding that people have, no matter what background you come from, for how to read how the picture, how the story unfolds in comic form. So there's something underlying even language and even cultural differences that comics can get at as an informational tool.
When you publish Japanese comics in America, I mean, there's a dispute in the industry whether you flip the whole book.
Yeah.
Because the Japanese does read in a different direction. We're programmed not biologically, but maybe not. Maybe it is partly biologically. We're programmed culturally on how to read left to right, top to bottom on a page. And we are programmed by, there's a very complex visual language of comics that's evolved over time. So it's not, it's not something you just instinctively necessarily jump into, but the language people have grown up with. And it is telegraphic, and it is instant. I wanted to get back to your idea of tricking people or cheating people or anything.
Subversive, yeah.
I don't think it's tricking or cheating people at all. I think it's just using the tools you have. You don't have to deceive people or lead them astray, but you can tell them a joke.
Yeah, I use the words ironically. Yeah, when you tell somebody a joke, you're technically tricking them a little bit. You're like, you think I'm going to say this sentence at the end, but I'm really going to say, aren't you glad I'm not a banana?
Right.
It's that little trick that your mind enjoys, and you go down that path willingly when you listen to a joke or read a cartoon
I just
or
don't want
watch a
people
magic
to think
trick.
we're advocating tricking people. We're trying to untrick people.
Yes.
Because they've been tricked.
Yes, there you go. I want to move along to the last thing I wanted to talk about, which is interaction with readers and how that's changed over the years. I'm going to start with cow tools. Do you guys remember cow tools? Gary Larson, The Far Side. Yes. Oh, we need more Gary Larson.
A lot of fans of cow tools. Good.
Yes. Cow tools caused a scandal back in 1982 when it came out because people didn't understand what the hell that meant. And Gary Larson later, explained my first mistake with that cartoon was thinking it was funny. And people started writing him, calling him. There was an editorial in Cartoon titled "Cow Tools, What Does It Mean?" And Larson, I'm going to quote from his book, it says, "For the first time, cow tools awakened me to the fact that my profession was not just an isolated exercise in the corner of my apartment. Everyone, it seemed, wanted to know what in the world this cartoon meant." And that was 1982. Now, how easy is it to Twitter your favorite celebrity right now in 2017? We have a much, much more vast array of ways to communicate with cartoonists. And that's where you guys come in as skeptics, because everybody needs fact checkers. This is a comic done by Dan Ferraro, who does Bizarro. Yeah, and Dan is a skeptic. He's an atheist skeptic. In fact, I wanted to get him here, but he happened to be moving to Mexico when the panel happened.
And that's why you got me.
Now, why was he moving?
Something about a wall? But Dan put this out, and he was kind of on the fence. He didn't really understand much about genetic GMO technology. And shortly after that happened, his blog filled up with what he called a very spirited debate. And he became convinced of things that he was unaware of before. People talked to him, scientists talked to him, and they said, "Hey, whoa, you're demonizing this thing, and that cartoon's going to get used by all these people who are trying to sell organic health food and this and that." And it has an effect. Here's a later cartoon he did. Oh, I don't know how to make that. There we go. Homeopathic surgeon. Now that's not making fun of GMO stuff. That's making fun of the other side in a big way. And if you look at his cartoons, they are informed, and you can comment on his blog. We have many cartoonists, as Lee said earlier. You can befriend your favorite editorial cartoonists on Facebook now. You can have a say in what they do, and I urge everybody to. Christopher Columbus, anybody read the Christopher Columbus oatmeal? He would have a long diatribe about Christopher Columbus and how he wanted to rename it Bartolome Day or Indigenous Peoples Day. Well, people pointed out some factual problems that were there with his assessment of Bartolome, and he addressed them. He put footnotes on it, but that it was a very powerful comic. And Explain XKCD is the last thing I wanted to show you guys. Are you familiar with, who here knows about XKCD? Oh, yeah. Written by a NASA engineer who became a full-time cartoonist. This is just okay, well, it's hard to see, but there is a wiki out there called Explain XKCD. This is the best form of cartoon and scientist outreach I can think of right now, which is a bunch of engineers, scientists, fans, science-minded people who will do you the favor of explaining the back jokes in every XKCD panel out there, in case you don't want to get it. And the pull to get the joke is powerful. I was reading Michael Mann's book, the Madhouse Effect, and I found myself getting a little bit bored by all the jet streams and there's a lot of climate speak, but I could see on the other side of the page, I could see there's a cartoon on the back of this, though. I better pay attention to this stuff because I won't get the cartoon. If I don't pay attention to the jets, that cartoon could be about jet stream interaction with the heat, and so it makes you pay attention. So let's talk about outreach and dealing with. You hear a lot about your cartoons, don't you?
Yeah, a bit, yeah. I write for the hyper-local section of the Review Journal. So a lot of our readership is older, more conservative, and I've learned not to make fun of cowboys anymore.
If they were real cowboys, they could take the joke.
I've met real cowboys, and they are not big on their sense of humor. Baxter Black aside.
Didn't you have to have a run-in with Bundy?
I didn't. No, I mean, that's more of a writing thing, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I was writing about the disputed land that Ted Bundy's involved in long before it became an issue, and then suddenly it became an issue. So.
Yeah, but cartoonists, I think, I have reached out to a bunch of science-minded people. In fact, one of the reasons I started coming to Skeptics conventions is because I wanted to do science comics. I do a little thing called Astounding Tales of Science, ProfessorScienceComic.com, and I've used many people I've met here. Okay, well, I'm not a geologist, and we don't have time to go to college for 5 years and take a specialty in something just so we can draw a funny comic.
Yeah, you won't make your deadline if you do that.
Yeah. So you got to call experts. You got to be open. When you get a call from a cartoonist, be open to giving them information that your background can help with. And likewise, if you see a cartoon come out that is completely full of pseudoscience or misconceptions, throw them an email. I mean, I appreciate knowing if there's something that I've gone wrong on that I can fix later.
In the 1970s, Charles Dickens was updated by Armistead Maupin in Tales of the City. And in the old days, Dickens got paid by the word. And if you've read some of his books, you can tell. But Maupin was in a very interesting circumstance, which is his readers could be in touch with him. And one of them said, "Oh, your character, Anna Madrigal, her name is an anagram, and it really means a man and a girl." And he was like, "Of course it does. That's what I meant to do the whole time." So this notion that creative people are special, we have special gifts, bullshit.
We're really good thefts.
We're so good at the stealing.
Steal like an artist. Yeah.
Steal like an artist. Artist what you can get away with. All of you are probably as capable or more capable than most of us. But even if you don't want to go there, if you have a funny idea that's going to forward critical thinking and science, for God's sake, let one of us know.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Margaret uses me all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Or if there's any publishers in the room and you're thinking about, I'm going to put out a book to dispel all these myths, etc., why don't you think about, I could put cartoons in my book.
Yep.
And then you could give one of us a call, and we'd be happy to work with you. I would like to see a good comic about evolution.
If you're
a
writing
really good one.
If you're writing something that's a little dense and a little dry, Funny pictures will help.
And
Any pictures will help.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are you guys ready to take some questions? Do we have like 5
We better.
minutes
We got
left?
about 5 minutes, yeah.
Okay. I think we can
Anyone?
take some questions.
We got time for a few. If you don't mind, I have one quick question. Where does it fall for you guys percentage-wise between good writing and good art?
It absolutely depends on who you're talking about. In some cases, good writing, say the Oatmeal or XKCD. XKCD is the best example.
Right.
It's all good writing. It's terrible artwork. But it's
yeah.
enough.
Comics are mainly a form of writing.
Yep.
They're a form of writing with pictures. And you can do it with stick figures.
But if you're Dan Peraro, that guy can draw.
Yeah.
Holy moly, can he draw?
Yeah. Dan, excellent draftsman. If you look at Tom Tomorrow, and sometimes it doesn't even require drawing, literally, Tom Tomorrow, it'll be a news story told in 4 paragraphs, and the only thing that makes it a comic is there's a little penguin with a word bubble in each panel. And you're like, oh, I want to hear what this penguin has to say.
If you want to go the other direction, Bill Watterson can tell a beautiful, touching story in nothing but pictures.
Yes,
Yeah. Well, Bill Watterson, most cartoonists can't draw as well as Bill Watterson.
Most artists can't draw as well as Bill Watterson. Holy moly, could that guy draw?
I can't remember who mentioned it, but it was about skepticism and atheism and saying that those words are are used in a negative connotation towards people. But now, and this is with memes and whatnot, now this idea that I'm a skeptic, I'm calling out bullshit on actual facts.
Deniers.
Huh?
You mean denialism?
Yeah, denialism. But they're calling themselves skeptics, and they're using a lot of what they're using is the memes and the cartoons to say, oh well, it's GMOs, they're horrible. They like the one picture with the GMOs, Larry Curly and GMO.
Peraro's
but
rare
I mean,
misstep. Yeah,
and that's happening a lot, and that's being used a lot to deny facts now, and it's kind of become, I guess, a badge of honor. How do you feel about that being used?
I hate it with a red passion. I was invited to a show in Boston where my significant other is 4,000 people. I'm here, and I'm here for the main reason that we need good branding. We need to be for something. Every single word that leaps to my mind. Yes, we're in the nonfiction community. We're atheists. What we are is a bunch of people who aren't.
And the other side has co-opted the word truth.
Right, and
truthers.
And so here we are, and we need to get that sorted. The one thing that I keep coming to is science, because they are not for science.
But how do you fight that though? With
The trouble is every force seems arrayed against that, to my way of thinking. And is it fun? The great talk last night talked about we would like to jump to the place of fun. It's aliens. Ooh.
The fun explanation.
But never jump to fun. The trouble is if fun is our last resort, which it perforce is, then we lose.
Yeah, that makes their side fun, and our side is the not fun side.
So it's a huge, huge challenge. And when words get co-opted, words like progressive or liberal or...
it's not just words. Like they're literally using your art form against us.
Well, yeah.
Any tool can be used wrong.
Yeah.
I mean,
Cow tools can be used wrong.
absolutely.
I have a sad, very quick story that I did a cartoon, one of my many non-published New Yorker submissions, of a little 2 spiny reptiles and a third younger spiny reptile, a little bit more hairy, and he says, "Mom, Dad, I have something to tell you. I'm a mammal." And I got an email from somebody who said, "I'd like to use your cartoon on an educational website." I said, "Sure, no problem." It's been up there for 17 years on this creationist website.
Oh.
And I have written to them annually and said, "Take this down. I do not give you permission to blah, 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 blah." And it's just one of these. It's up there in the ether, and it's never going away. The people in the other galaxies are reading it by now. Who knows?
Well,
I was at Teotihuacan north of Mexico City in November, and it was 1,000 years old when the Aztecs found it. 1,000 years old. And they named it the Pyramid of the Sun, the Aztecs did. And they were wrong. It's the Pyramid of the Water God, Tlaloc. Try to tell anyone that. It's the Pyramid of the frickin' Sun. You can't beat that PR, right? This is an old problem.
Yeah, we got about a minute left, so we got.
I wanted to speak to ambiguity real quick. Anything that is ambiguous can be used by both sides, and cartoons by nature, just to be funny, there's often a little bit of ambiguity there. And our only hope, really, to have our cartoons completely understood, if they're a little ambiguous, the way we want them to, not the way that your creation, yours was hijacked by creationists, is to educate the public as much as we can, so that when they see a cartoon with a little ambiguity, they're laughing at the ambiguity, but they understand it. They understand what they're what the underlying message is. So, sorry, you have one more question? Or
there was one more. It was just a source for some of the comics that you had today. If there's a centralized or particular artist, maybe you could mention real quickly.
There's a ton of great science cartoonists out there. Zach Wienersmith, XKCD. The Oatmeal has some.
Can we get these people a lovely list online?
Yes, I will assemble a list. In fact, I thought I had one, but yeah.
And if I can double down on Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, every producer in Hollywood has it on their shelves. We think of film and we think of TV as moving things. The minute the storyboards, or what we call cartoons, were done, Hitchcock was done. He didn't have much interest in what followed. He had to do it. He had to go through the motions to make his movies. But it's the essence of the thing that can be distilled. The reason the movie The Matrix got made was because the storyboards were the most delightful comic. So understanding comics means understanding much else, and it's
how to communicate.
Storytelling.
Storytelling, yeah.
Storytelling.
Lee, Tom, Andrew, and Celestia, there you are.
Thank
Very
you.
nicely done.